So, since the 2024 election did not go the way of not fascism, I think the postmortems uh, I'm in favor of. I think we should never stop learning the lessons of what happens when you run centrist Democrats without a strong vision and who do not speak to the realities of Americans and talk about things like economic economies or economic what is it? The opportunity economy, excuse me, versus just saying things like Medicare for all or, universal basic income or, massive limits on rent gouging and price gouging and all this. So, but one of those lessons for me, as we are in a week where Israel has absolutely ramped up its attacks on Gaza. And not only that, but is openly saying this is their final solution. We know that 80% of buildings in Gaza have been destroyed. And just over the last few days, you're talking 600 people killed, mostly refugee camps. We're looking at, I think the UN just this morning said 14,000 children, babies are at risk of dying in the next 48 hours if aid doesn't enter. Israel's promised to allow a little bit of aid in. That aid is not reaching people. So it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to receive it, it's another thing to survive. And that is not actually what the Israeli government wants, and largely because no restraint was put from the American government onto the Israeli government. It has not happened, obviously, under Trump, and it sure as shit did not happen under Biden. And really being honest about that, and how that contributed to so many ostensible Democrats staying home, feeling like their issues didn't matter, feeling like they tried, that they, cried out, they made calls, they took the streets and were reprimanded and called, petulant or anti Semitic at worst, for standing up for the people of Gaza. I mean, that really all should factor into any Democratic Party that's worth its salt, that wants to move forward in this time. And yet, one of the main organizers of the uncommitted movement, Walid Shahid, had a back and forth with Amr Moussa, who is the former director of the Kamala Harris Rapid Response Team, worked on her campaign, was a former speechwriter for Joe Biden. He's steeped. He's a young guy, steeped in the Democratic Party. This is one of them, Democratic consultants, kind of Democratic operatives. That is this person. And upon news that Trump is trying to relocate 1 million Palestinians from Gaza to Libya, Amar tweeted, CC the uncommitted movement. Now, if you can't read between the lines, this is what we've been seeing from a lot of, blue MAGA libs, which is let's blame the people who had a problem with voting for someone who was greenlighting genocide and supplying the weapons to do said genocide. Let's blame them rather than my candidate who refused to budge after months, after the international outcry, after all kinds of human rights bodies said what they said about what was happening, the ICJ cases against Israel, the arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant, that no. It's these pesky little lefties who can't see past the dead babies. That's who we're going to blame. And Waleed responded, which I think is a very perfect response, saying there's a genre of Democratic operative who spent the last year gaslighting the public and covering up Biden's decline, who now only invoke Palestinians not to mourn them, but to mock them. It's cynical hackery at its worst, divisive and self-sabotaging at a moment when we should be earning back the trust of voters. This party pushed away. If we're serious about stopping MAGA, like showing up late to a funeral just to shame the mourners for crying. That is beautifully said. And then, of course, Amr Moussa has to respond. There's a genre of Dem operative who cares more about clout chasing than winning elections. Waleed led a campaign to persuade voters Kamala Harris would have treated Palestine the same as Trump. He knew that was a lie, but he couldn't stop because it damaged his business. Okay, there's 3 fallacies in that, but the idea that Waleed is clout chasing, okay, whatever, my guy, yes, anyone who works on primarying Democrats must be chasing clout. Because that's a total winning strategy. Every single time it works. Hell yeah, every time you push Dems from the left, you always win. But the idea, number one, that the uncommitted movement said that Trump was going to be the same as Kamala Harris is a blatant lie. Waleed then points that out, citing a New York Times article, which says that the uncommitted movement knew that Kamala Harris, there was more opportunity. She would be an improvement for Biden from Biden's severe lack of empathy, said Waleed at the time. An improvement, not only from Biden, but obviously from Trump as well. But like the last part about all you care about is the sorry, that they care about clout chasing rather than winning elections is just wild to me, because the uncommitted movement, I think for those of you who might follow me, for those of you who disagreed with me about supporting Kamala Harris as a lesser of two evils, I think you know that some of these last ditch efforts to bring disaffected people back into the political process, like the uncommitted movement, was the only thing that was engaging voters in 2024. And that, along with efforts like Swap My Vote, if you guys remember that, which was people in safe blue states swapping their vote with people in swing states, so that the person in the blue state would vote for Kamala Harris, or no, would vote for a third party, while the person in that swing state that was more at risk would vote for Kamala, even though they were morally against it. If you guys remember that, there were so many attempts, but the uncommitted movement was absolutely shunted. They didn't allow a single Palestinian or Arab or Muslim speaker on the DNC stage. And they were sidelined. Yeah, they met with them, but it was like, yeah, no thanks. And on top of that, lastly, I think we all need to remember, Kamala Harris volunteers were directed, when they received text messages or emails or calls about Gaza, to write that wasn't about Gaza, that they had that there was no response. They just weren't responding. So it was like nobody picked up the phone, nobody responded back. So Gaza was a non-issue in Kamala's eyes. Even though her language was maybe one hair to the better of Joe Biden's, felt like maybe there was a little bit more performative sympathy, but in practice, nothing. And so I am bitching about the callousness with which these Democratic operatives, who are so close to actual power, treat the entire base. And again, it's not just Gaza, folks. It's not just people who care about that issue. It is voters of color. It is voters who care about actually reining in the cops, like in 2020, a surge of momentum that got Biden elected in the first place. It is trans voters. It is women. It is all of us, all of the people who feel marginalized. It is working people, and to be so eager to blame voters rather than your own bullshit strategy, it's just like, it makes me lose hope in the Democratic Party. And we all know my hope in the Democratic Party and faith in it is at an all-time low. And what do you know? So are most Americans. We'll look at the polling a little bit later. So it's really disgusting. And if they don't learn to wise up, they're going to lose again and again. And it won't be because of people like me who are telling my audience, vote for the lesser of two evils as much as it pains you. No, but like, you can't fake it. You can't fake caring about people's issues when you're overseeing this kind of treatment and genocide and flaunting international law. You can't then say, oh, but Trump and norms and democracy and human rights. And no, because you don't abide by the same thing. You're such a hypocrite. So that's on you. That's on you. And it's very disheartening. And what do I do when I feel disheartened? Well, because my heart palpitations seemingly start to increase, my blood pressure rises, sometimes you want to relax. Sometimes you want to pop a little relax gummy from Sunset Lake CBD. That is right.